1 d4, the Yugoslav international master Mario Bertok opens with the queen's pawn, aiming for a solid, strategic game against the tournament's clear leader, Fischer. 1 d5, Fischer responds with perfect classical symmetry, entering the solid and respected queen's gambit declined, prepared for a deep positional struggle. 2 c4, Bertok applies more pressure to the center, creating the classic queen's gambit pawn structure and initiating a complex and nuanced battle for control of the key central squares. 2 e6, Fischer chooses the most solid and reliable setup, reinforcing his d5 pawn and preparing for a harmonious development of his kingside pieces. 3 nc3, a logical and powerful developing move. Bertok brings his knight to its ideal square, reinforcing his central grip and preparing to meet any of black's plans. 3 b7, a subtle but important move order. By delaying the development of his knight to f6, Fischer avoids certain sharp variations and keeps his options flexible. 4 nf3, Bertok continues with standard, principled development, bringing his knight to its best square and preparing to complete his control over the center of the board. For nf6, Fischer develops his knight, and the game now transposes into one of the main lines of the queen's gambit declined, a theoretical battleground. 5 bg5, Bertok develops his bishop with a pin on the knight, a classic method for creating pressure and hoping to provoke weaknesses in the black kingside. 5 Fischer calmly castles his king to safety, unconcerned by the pin. He knows that his solid structure gives him ample resources to meet any threats. 6 e3, the most solid continuation. Bertok prepares to develop his light-squared bishop, reinforces his center, and creates a solid foundation for his middle game plans. 6 h6, the thematic and necessary pawn move. Fischer questions the white bishop, forcing it to make a decision and gaining a small amount of space on the kingside. 7 bh4, the bishop retreats, maintaining the pin and the pressure. This leads to the famous Tartakower variation, known for its strategic depth and complexity. 7 b6, Fischer initiates the key plan of the Tartakower defense. He prepares to fianchetto his problem light-squared bishop to b7, where it will become a powerful piece. 8 cxd5, Bertok chooses the Makaganov exchange variation, a simplifying approach that aims for a small but lasting positional edge by clarifying the central pawn structure early. 8 nxd5, Fischer recaptures with the knight, keeping his pawn structure intact and heading for a position where his active pieces will compensate for any spatial disadvantage. 9 b7, the first of several exchanges. Bertok trades his bishop for the knight, hoping to ease black's defensive task, but this also gives Fischer's queen a more active role. 9 xc7, the simple recapture brings the queen to a useful central square. From here, it supports the center and can participate in action on either side of the board. 10 nxd5, the second exchange. The knights come off the board, and the resulting position is one of apparent simplicity, but Fischer will soon demonstrate its hidden complexities. 10 exd5, the recapture creates a classic hanging pawn structure on c5 and d5 for black. These pawns can be a strength, controlling space, but also a potential weakness. 11 b2, Bertok continues with quiet and solid development, preparing to castle his king and complete his piece setup before starting any concrete plans. 11 b6, Fischer develops his bishop to a solid square, preparing to challenge white's control of the center and support the advance of his hanging pawns. 12 Bertok castles his king to safety, connecting his rooks. The opening phase is now complete, and the complex strategic middle game is about to begin. 12 c5, Fischer advances his pawn, committing to the hanging pawn structure. He is confident in his ability to use these pawns dynamically to seize the initiative. 13 dxc5, Bertok challenges the pawn chain, hoping to create a weakness. However, this exchange also opens the b-file for black's rook, giving him new avenues for counterplay. 13 bxc5, the recapture solidifies the hanging pawns. Fischer now has a powerful pawn duo in the center that controls key squares and serves as a springboard for his pieces. 14 qa4, a typical queen maneuver in these positions. Bertok puts pressure on black's queenside and prepares to challenge Fischer's control of the newly opened files. 14. QB7, Fischer responds in kind, bringing his queen to an excellent square where it defends, eyes the weak b2 pawn, and supports his own queenside expansion. 15. QA3, the white queen repositions, putting direct pressure on the c5 pawn. The strategic battle is now centered on the control of the queenside. 15. ND7, a calm and masterful developing move. Fischer reinforces his pawn, prepares to challenge white's control, and brings his last minor piece into the game. 16. No1, a slightly passive knight retreat. Bertok is trying to reorganize his pieces to meet black's growing pressure, but this allows Fischer to seize even more space. 16. A5, the attack begins. Fischer launches his queenside pawn storm, a classic method for exploiting the power of the hanging pawns to create a decisive attack. 17. ND3, the white knight finds a more active square, blockading the d-pawn and putting pressure on c5. However, Fischer has a powerful reply prepared. 17. C4, a brilliant pawn thrust. Fischer uses his hanging pawn as a battering ram, kicking the white knight and seizing even more space on the queenside. The initiative is now firmly with black. 18. In f4, the knight is forced to a flank square, but it is still a nuisance. However, Fischer's control of the center and queenside is becoming overwhelming. 18. RFB8, the rook joins the party with decisive effect. Fischer brings his final piece into the attack on the queenside, putting unbearable pressure on the weak b2 pawn. 19. Rab1, Bertok is forced into a passive defensive posture. His rook is tied down to the defense of a single pawn, a clear sign that his position is strategically difficult. 19. Bf5, the bishop lands on a magnificent square. From f5, it paralyzes the white position, puts pressure on the center, and prepares for the final, decisive combination. 20. RBD1, Bertok is forced to abandon the b-file and desperately try to consolidate his central defenses, but Fischer's pressure is coming from all sides. 20. NF6, a precise and powerful knight retreat. The knight moves to the ideal defensive square, shoring up the d5 pawn and preparing to join the attack on other fronts. 21. RD2, white is completely paralyzed. He can only shuffle his pieces back and forth, trying to hold his crumbling position together against Fischer's relentless pressure. 21. G5, a sign of complete confidence and domination. Fischer is not afraid to push the pawns in front of his own king to kick the white knight and seize total control. 22. NXD5, a desperate tactical attempt from Bertok, who hopes to create some confusion in a strategically lost position. However, Fischer has calculated everything. 22. NXD5, the simple recapture. Fischer knows that after this exchange, his positional advantage will be even greater and more decisive. 23. BXC4, the bishop captures the pawn, but this piece will soon be a target itself. Fischer's pieces are perfectly poised to exploit the new weaknesses. 23. B6, a masterful bishop move. The bishop lands on the ideal blockading square, from where it controls key diagonals, eyes the white pieces, and cements black's complete control. 24. RFD1, Bertok brings his last rook to the center, his last hope of creating some sort of counterplay, but he walks directly into a stunning and decisive tactical blow. 24. Next 3, the Thunderbolt. A breathtaking knight sacrifice that completely shatters white's position. This brilliant move deflects the white queen and wins a piece by force. 25. C3, Bertok is forced to accept the sacrifice, but his queen is now lured away from the defense of the c4 bishop, which is the entire point of Fischer's brilliant combination. 25. BXC4, the smoke clears, and Fischer has won a clean piece. The rest of the game is a simple matter of technique for a player of his caliber. 26. H4, a desperate, last-gasp attack from Bertok. He tries to create threats against the black king, but it is a futile gesture in a materially lost position. 26. Re8, a calm and precise defensive move. Fischer brings his rook to the central file, ready to meet any threats and begin the process of consolidating his winning advantage. 27. QG3, the white queen tries to create some threats, but it is a lone warrior fighting against a coordinated black army. Fischer easily parries the danger. 27, QE7, the queen comes back to a perfect defensive square. From here, it controls the kingside, supports the center, and prepares to lead the final, decisive counterattack. 28, B3, a feudal pawn move that does nothing to solve white's fundamental problems. Fischer's extra piece will be the decisive factor in the game. 28, B6, the bishop calmly retreats, its mission accomplished. It is now ready to take up a new post to support the final, winning phase of the game. 29, F4, another desperate attempt to create chaos, but this move only creates new and fatal weaknesses in white's own position, which Fischer will exploit with ruthless precision. 29, G4, the door is slammed shut. A brilliant and decisive pawn move that completely neutralizes white's counterplay and creates a monster passed pawn. The game is over. 30, H5, a final, feudal pawn push. It does nothing to change the outcome and is merely the last act of a completely lost position. 30, QC5+, the final assault begins. The check forces the white king to a more vulnerable square and initiates the game-ending attack. 31, RF2, the king is forced to a passive square, or it is a helpless spectator to the destruction of its own kingdom. 31, BF5, the elegant and crushing final move. The bishop lands on F5, creating a deadly pin on the e-pawn and threatening to win even more material. Seeing no defense, Mario Bertok resigns.